little girly. Hello, hello. Pay no attention to whining chickens in the background. I'm sitting in their coop, so they're a little angry with me. Okay, a lot angry with me. Anyway, today I want to talk about time travel. And by that I mean, I shot a video 2 days ago and I forgot to film an introduction. So 2 days later, I'm pretending like this is the beginning of the video chronologically, but it's not. I'm lying. The weather has been like perfect for the last 5 days, so I've just been getting tons of stuff done. I've been working about 12 hours a day outside. I'm sunburnt, I'm tired, I'm sore, I'm ready for some rain to shut me down for a day or two so I can just turn on Netflix and chill or something. But anyway, one of the projects I have been working on, I wanted to share with you, is how to fill up my raised beds. I built all these raised beds last winter, and I didn't really fill them all the way up to the top, and with all the drainage issues that we have around here, the higher I can raise my raised beds, the better. I only had about an inch of compost above the soil level when I started working on the gardens this week, and I really don't want to buy hundreds of dollars worth of bagged soil or order some truckloads full of soil and have it trucked in, because that's just money on dirt. And to be honest, I don't think it's any better at the store. In fact, last year when I bought in a couple truckloads of dirt, it was garbage, it was junk, and I can do better myself. So my little secret for doing this is that I've been getting free horse manure, and I've been composting it over the winter, and I'm going to use that to raise the bed. And that means that I had to dig it out because I don't want to fill up the top of the bed with horse manure and plant directly in it. So while I'm taking this opportunity to dig out the beds, I figure I'm going to mix up a couple different gardening styles. One of them is called Hugelkultur, which, yes, is a goofy name, but Hugelkultur is a German word for the idea of burying lumber, or excuse me, not lumber, but timbers, woods. I just got hit by a chicken in the background. Hugelkultur means burying timbers, big chunks of logs and stuff, and then putting soil over it and planting on top of it. And over time, the fungus that grows on the lumber, that improves the soil, and it also just raises the level. It retains moisture. It has a lot of benefits. So that sounds great, but you know what? There's other types and methods of gardening too, so I'm going to mix up a bunch of them. Another one is called core gardening, where you bury some straw in the soil, and that helps retain moisture, and then during dry periods it releases that moisture. Now, I don't have too many issues with needing moisture, so I'm just going to put a little bit of straw, a lot less than is normally recommended. But I'm also, oh, hello there, I just got another chicken attack me. But I'm also going to mix up a third style of gardening, and it's going to be called a hotbed garden. Now, like I said, I don't want to put all the manure on the top. I don't want to plant directly in the manure. But if I bury it about 10 or 12 inches down, it composts still, and it heats up, and it makes the cold soil in the spring quite a bit warmer. I measured it today, and it was like 6 or 7 degrees warmer than if I hadn't buried it. So I'm going to get out of the coop because they're all angry with me, and we'll go backwards in time and just pretend like I'm doing this right, and I'll show you what I worked on. So here's that compost pile that I set up in the last video, and I've got some plastic covering it, and there's cardboard too. Pay no attention to that. That's to hold the cardboard and stuff from blowing away in the wind. But if we come in here, I've got a thermometer in here, and it's 110 degrees today. Now, a day or two after I made that last video, I came in, I added a little bit more horse manure and some more wood mulch. And this pile heated up overnight. It was 140 degrees. It probably got as high as 160. I didn't measure it too much, but I had to come out and turn this over all the time, because if it gets too hot, at like around 170 degrees, it'll actually kill off all the microbes that are doing the composting. But either way, this thing is starting to cool down now to 110 degrees, so it's time to take off some of this cardboard and put it to better use. And on a related note, if you see windows laying around in the background of my videos, that's because this is my little trick to getting the compost heating up faster. You can put clear plastic on the piles, and that traps sunlight. It's the greenhouse effect. But these guys here, if you put those on top of the piles, they really add a greenhouse effect and just get those piles heated up really quickly if there's any sun out that day. So here we have buckets and tarps and wheelbarrows full of soil and compost that I dug out of this 4x4 bed. I built this bed in about December of last year. We had a couple good warm days, and I ran out and built about 6 raised beds. And at the time I didn't have a lot of material to fill them. So I started at the soil level and I laid it down and I put cardboard on top. And actually before I laid the cardboard down, I took a fork and I forked the soil just to get some air in there, but then I put cardboard down to smother and kill off the grass. And then I topped it off with a couple inches of compost that I already had. But there wasn't enough to really fill this up because over the couple months that level dropped down to the point where it's only about an inch of compost. So one of my goals today is to just raise this up all the way up to the top without going and buying a bunch of stuff and bringing it in, because I've got a lot of materials on hand. So all these tarps and everything are because I dug down over 18 inches this morning. I didn't film that because you know what digging a hole looks like. It's not exciting. And I already put down a layer underneath these logs. I put down some horse manure and some wood chips and some green grass clippings. Not a lot, just a little bit. Then I put down these 3 logs and I jumped up and down on them to tamp them down and really nice and firm and solid. And from there we're just going to build up, and hopefully this helps to save me, a couple bags worth of soil by the time I'm done. And it sounds petty to, try to save a couple bags worth of soil or compost expense, but multiply that times the thousands of square feet I'm working on. Yep, it adds up real quick, right? So now I've taken a layer of dirt from the tarps and thrown it on here, as well as some composted manure. The reason I put the manure on the bottom and a little bit on the top is to give some form of nitrogen available for the composting bacteria to work on these logs. Otherwise, in theory, too much carbon in the soil will rob the nitrogen that is what should be available for plants. I don't know if it's really true or not. That's a subject of debate, but I figure I can resolve that issue just by adding a little bit of nitrogen back into this equation. Now, the thing is, you see the shovel there, and an important thing to do now is to go in and cut it in, all this soil and compost, to make sure there's no air pockets under here. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to top this off with a couple inches of fun stuff, horse manure, and then we'll talk about why. So I just put like 4 or 5 inches of manure, well, compost and manure mix into here, and it was 110 degrees when we measured it earlier, and it's still going to continue to compost and warm up after we put it in here and we top it off with some soil. And we're going to use that to our advantage by having that warm up the soil, and I'll plant some warm weather crops like cucumbers in here way too early. We are still about 2 weeks away from the last expected frost date for the year, so I'm going to put in something that needs warm soil and hopefully get like an early harvest out of them. But first we have to top this off with a little bit of straw. I'm going to do something called the core method, but in the traditional core method you would put a lot of straw, or you'd put a lot of dry leaves or dry grass, and those would retain moisture, and then during periods of dry it would then release the moisture back. Again, I don't have a lot of issues with too much dryness here. I have too much moisture most of the time, so I don't want to overdo it. I'm just going to put a thin layer of this stuff right about the 10-inch mark, and then I'll top that off with soil, and then I'll top that off with compost that had been sitting here stewing over winter for a couple months. And then after that, this bed should be good to go. It should be like, leave it alone, don't till it ever again, just top it off with a little bit of compost every year and grow right in it. We're not done yet, but here I filled this up with a lot of the soil. There were 2 tarps over here that I dumped in there, and I still have a wheelbarrow over here full of dirt and dead, decaying grass clumps, and this can be put to better use somewhere else sooner than later. But right now this thing's almost full up. It's about 2 inches down from the top, and we still have buckets of compost to put on top of there. So I'm going to let this dry out for a bit so that I can crack up these clods a little bit, rake it flat, and then we'll top it off and we'll be done. Okay, so it's been a couple hours now. I went and I painted my porch and cut the lawn and did some other things and had to put on my sunglasses and my hat because I'm getting a sunburn from a couple days out here. It's funny how it was cold and rainy and overcast, and now a couple days of sun, you know, you get back into that mode of getting burnt all the time if you're gardening. Wear sunscreen, folks. Public service announcement. Anyway, I came in here and I let this soil dry out a bit, and I flattened it out with my garden weasel. I'll show that in a second, and kind of broke up the clods, and then I'm going to top it off with all the compost that had been here originally. So it should be up to the top when we're done, and then we'll just let it sit overnight, and then I'll plant out tomorrow. Again, I'm thinking I'm going to put cucumbers, and then we'll check back in a bit to see how well this did compared to, I'm just going to plant some other cucumbers at the quote-unquote right time of the year and see which does better. All right. And there you go, pretty much good to go. Again, we're gonna let this sit overnight. I might have to come and garden weasel it one more time, just get a little bit flat. But this is already a couple inches higher than it was when I started this morning. And I also have a full wheelbarrow of fill to work with now somewhere else. So that worked out okay, putting the logs down in there and filling it up with manure and other stuff. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of work. I mean, it didn't take me all day. I worked on other things, and it takes a lot longer when you're working on a video. I have to imagine the fastest I could do this 4x4 bed was be about an hour's worth of work, probably a bit longer. So I hope it pays off, and it'll be interesting to see what the results are. So here we are now, day 2. It's a brisk 40-degree morning, and I have a soil probe down in one of these regular old raised beds outside. And the soil temperature about 3 inches down is 51 degrees. Now this is a bed that hasn't been amended with anything other than regular old compost all winter. Now let's come over to the bed that we worked on yesterday and get this probe down there as deep as it can. Look at that temperature jump up already. So the other one was at 51 degrees. This one's at 59 right now. And I bet if I can push that down even further, see, it went up 60 right away. I bet if I went down 6 inches, it'd be a good 65 or 70 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant some of these cucumbers in this bed. Half of these I'll save and I'll put in after the last frost date. And then these ones I'll put in now, 2 weeks before the frost date, because it's April 2nd. And we'll compare how well they do. I'm not actually a big fan of planting things out too early because they seem to languish, and then the ones that are planted out at the correct time always seem to just catch up to the earlier plantings. But I'm curious to see how this hotbed, if it affects it, and if I get earlier yields or if it's just a waste of time. Either way, I don't feel like I've wasted any time because I've definitely improved this bed into the future. And going forward, this bed should be like no real tilling whatsoever. Just come in and level it off in the spring and put a little more compost on top and plant away. Alright, thanks again for watching, and we'll have to check back on this in a couple months after all the cucumbers are done for the final results. Alright, thanks again. Bye-bye.